The short answer is your relationships are your currency. You can't really go alone. Otherwise, there's not really a great deal of incentive to listen to you.
Customer experience wisdom, a dash of travel talk. We've been cleared for takeoff.
The best meals are served outside and require a passport.
Hey, CX Passport travelers, welcome back to this week's episode of CX Passport. Joining us this week is Sean Cherry, Manager of Member and Customer Experience Insights at LinkedIn. Sean brings nearly 15 years in CX, analytics, and strategy with experience turning data into insights for customer-focused solutions across brands like Comcast, Wells Fargo, and, well, now LinkedIn. Data, insights, solutions. That's the kind of customer journey I like to see. At LinkedIn, Sean leads initiatives to connect customer insights with CX, UX, and product operations, driving improvements in satisfaction and product engagement. He's known for using data to tell compelling stories that influence senior leadership decisions and foster customer-centric approaches. Stories. I'm eager to hear some of those compelling stories today. Sean, welcome to CX Passport.
Hey, good morning, Rick. Thanks for having me. And
Yeah,
thanks for that introduction. It's really nice.
Yeah, well, it's easy when you got a guest that's got a story a story. I didn't even mean to say that, but a story like yours, and I'm glad to have you on the show. Sean is joining us today from South Philly. Is that right? Philly? Yes, South
right.
Philly.
That's right.
I'm in Texas. We will not talk football today. Fear not, because I don't want to get into a fight with a guest. How awkward that would be. So, Sean, customer feedback, customer insights, customer voice. You and I know this is vital. Companies are often underutilizing this. You've got go-to-market in your job title. How should companies use these insights, these customer inputs, as they are looking to go to market, aka grow revenue?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think there's a number of ways that they can use this more effectively than they are today. So one thing that I've kind of noticed throughout my career is just sort of the the sunk cost of asking your customers for feedback and then just underutilizing it. I think a lot of that, like in my opinion, comes from just sort of this legacy place of where feedback collection and surveys were more so a tool for performance measurement and QA, and less about customer experience and VOC, and making continuous process improvements. And even if that's not the case, you still might have these scenarios where there's a couple dashboards living out there that, they've existed for 10 or 15 years and some executive is like really fond of it. And for lack of a better word, they're sort of just watching the score. I've worked at companies where, we've had, televisions in the office showing the net promoter score from our loyalty tracking survey that goes out randomly to, a percentage of the customer base, at random, executed by a research vendor. And then we take like a rolling average of that number. And hey, like, don't get me wrong, it's great to see that measure of loyalty go up over time. And I think it motivates the employees at HQ, but I can also recall times where that number dropped. Instead of really understanding like what makes up that number continuously as part of your job as, a CX practitioner or VOC leader, insights manager, whatever it is that you do at the company, it felt that at times it felt very reactive. Like, oh no, our NPS went down. And then you have to remember, we use like a rolling 8-week average. So we need to figure out like when it dropped, why it dropped, what cohort of customers, what product, like, and so you're already just like so behind the issue. And so I guess that's one thing that I would say is, like in terms of how people can really use the feedback more effectively, I guess if I had to break it down into some bullet points, it would be to actually use the surveys that you have. Your customers' feedback is a gift. You'll learn a lot if you take the time to just read, even if you just read a couple a day. It would be better, obviously, if the entire company had like, systematized processes where everyone was empowered and engaged in getting that feedback. But even just reading a few a day, I think that are specific to kind of like the part of the business you work on is huge. Um, most places I've worked have not had a standardized practice of
Mm-hmm.
taking action and following up on the feedback they
Oh my gosh.
receive. Yeah. And
You
so
are starting to get into my sweet spot. There's a lot in there that you were talking about. One thing that we may come back to. Actually, no, I'm going to ask you this now. You mentioned something about the scoreboard in in the room, whatever that might look like, contact center, or whether it's some other role, that sort of stuff. And I have been a part of places that did that. You see it a lot in contact center when
oh
it's
yeah,
like operational metrics for sure.
sure. Yep.
You said something that's interesting, and you said it can be motivating for the employee. And I've been sort of on a mantra of stop surveying scores and that aspect of it. Is there something that perhaps I'm guilty of, and others have thrown the baby out with the bathwater, of saying the scores are not what's important? Are we ignoring that motivational part, or in fact, is that motivational part a more high risk thing that we shouldn't be going down that path using scores to do so?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I tend to generally be in your camp where um it's less about the score and more
Yeah.
about like what's really going on underneath the score, like what makes that number what it is. Um I think the main reason it was motivating, well, there are a couple of reasons. One company in particular that I worked for where it was especially motivating was the first factor was we were coming from a place where the score was extraordinarily low. And so
Mm-hmm.
seeing that growth over time, I think was energizing for folks. The other piece, candidly was this particular company did a really nice job of um, tying financial compensation to their performance with regards to customer experience and loyalty metrics.
Okay.
And so I think that gave everyone, even if you're not in the contact center, like in my case, I was at the company's headquarters in a non-customer facing role. And so that to me, that's a way of getting your senior leaders and your product managers, and your analysts, all these folks that think to themselves like, well, I don't talk to customers, and
Mm-hmm.
I don't, I'm not responsible, quote unquote, for the customer experience. I think that sort of brought to them a lens of like, hey, actually, your work does ladder up and contribute to the overall customer experience, and here's how and here's why, and I guess most importantly, like here's why you should care. Your bonus at the end of the year will be better if
Right.
if we can reduce our churn and keep these
Yeah.
customers happier.
This is your captain speaking. I want to thank you for listening to CX Passport today. We've now reached our cruising altitude, so I'll turn that seatbelt sign off. While you're getting comfortable, hit that follow or subscribe button on your favorite podcast app so you'll never miss an episode. Love it if you'd tell a friend about CX Passport, leave a review so others can discover the show as well. Now, sit back and enjoy the rest of the episode.
Well, and I like that you said reduce our churn, because there's a danger in using incentives. And I'm going to use, folks have heard me say this before, capital I incentives, which means hard dollars,
Mm-hmm.
and tie it to a CSAT score or an NPS score or something like that, because it is so relatively easy to game. We saw it at one of my former employers. We saw individuals gaming the system by wiping out email addresses so a survey wouldn't be sent after a bad call.
Yep.
Those sorts of things. And so there's a risk of that, but you didn't say score. You said to customer churn, which is the actual financial and business result that is being sought, and that tying incentives to business results via customer experience sounds like a valuable way to attack that tension between incentives and gaming and motivating people to deliver a great experience.
I would agree. I think it removes, some of the bias and risk for gaming. Yeah, like coming prior to CX, I was in a lot of roles that were more heavy into analytics and business reporting, business intelligence, things like that. And I can recall working on a sales program and just seeing sales numbers that were extraordinary and thinking to myself, like, how is this person doing? How are they doing this? And getting in and coming to understand that this person found some sort of, loophole in the CRM where, even if they don't get the sale today, if the customer takes some action within, X number of weeks, there's a loophole where that sale will be attributed to, their ID in the system. And so, I mean, yeah, like people are extraordinarily clever, and like gaming can and will take place. And so, yeah, I'm a big believer that it's important to kind of find ways to mitigate that. And I think like looking at churn and retention was I guess a less biased way to achieve that.
People are extraordinarily clever. Now, I don't want to make that the title because it's not what we're going to only talk about, but I love the idea of people. What a great turn of phrase that you've got there. Let's go back to, you were talking about the insights, and you were talking about how a lot of companies don't do a great job of then turning that into action, something that creates an experience. You've used this term with me before. Create an experience that sucks less. Yeah. So if a company wanted to actually do it, you say that you've seen that it doesn't work well in some. What is an example of where you've seen it work really well? What did that look like?
In terms of bringing the insights to action?
Getting to action where it's a tangible result at the end.
Yeah. Well, I would say the first step and most important piece of that is just like having really great relationships with the different stakeholders that are kind of party to what you're doing. So in my experience recently, like what that typically looks like is, the product team, the people that are actually customer facing. So whether that's the support team in a contact center. I used to work for a large cable company. And so that could mean like a retail store or technicians that go into people's homes. But the short answer is like your relationships are kind of your currency. Okay. You can't really go alone. And you also need to kind of like build some sort of equity by bringing these people insights that are going to help them. Otherwise, there's not really a great deal of incentive to listen to you. I think the last thing that people want is the feeling that CX is here to be a QA person to tell them how to do their job more effectively. Okay. And so like in my experience working in CX, I've had to kind of break down that wall and say like, if I'm finding something that can be done better or improved for the customer experience, I'm not coming to you through the lens of like QA and telling you that, you're doing a bad job. You don't need another boss to like tell you what to do.
Right.
So I think like to get from a place of insights to action, the first thing that is paramount is just kind of setting up that framework of like how we're going to work together and forming your alliances basically, and earning your seat in their organization's meetings where maybe you would otherwise not be present. As far as getting from insights to action, the way I've kind of gone about that is just framing the finding in a way that is meaningful to them. So by tethering myself like with these teams and trying to embed myself as much as possible, like, if you think about like a journalist that's embedded with, a team of firefighters or something, or right out in California, like, I don't know, this is a bad example maybe, but like, I sort of see myself as kind of that ride along with them. And so by doing that, I try to understand like what metrics and KPIs are important to them, and then discerning what the customers are telling us through their quantitative feedback, but also like their verbatim responses. Just kind of craft a narrative and say like, okay, this is how this correlates to your KPI and whatever it is that they're focusing on. Maybe they're in a position where I feel like the trend over the last several years has really been cost reduction. So a popular one has
understatement of the year, right,
yeah.
Sean?
Yeah.
I like how calmly you said that. I think it's a trend. Yeah, no, it's significant, right?
It's very significant. I would say since, basically since COVID, all of the kind of organizations I've worked with since that time, it's like, yes, delivering a best in class experience is still very, very important, but even more so, I would argue, is doing it efficiently or doing more with less, kind of padding your costs for kind of that rainy day. Because I don't know if it's exclusively COVID, but maybe COVID and the macroeconomic headwinds that followed. But
Right.
regardless, I feel like ever since then, everyone has a little bit more of like a penchant to pad for a rainy day. And that's fine. I think it does make our life a little bit harder as like a CX practitioner. You want to deliver the best experience, but now you kind of have to have a lens of how can I deliver the best experience within the constraints that
Yeah.
are budgetary
Yeah.
reasonable.
And I
So
think, and inspired by that, I think it's something that actually CX teams have been called to, called to the table on over the last couple of years. Some of the cost cutting is the CX teams that didn't pay attention to this. Those that have recognized that a great experience can be both one that increases revenue, going back to that, go to market thing that's in your role, and how do we grow that market? It can also be, how can we create a great experience that reduces costs? Those are not inherently in opposition to each other. They can be. It can be very easy to cut costs that degrades experience. But a wise team, a wise group that's working together with their operations, with their insights, with their product teams, can find that way to create an experience that does both. And it's a great experience and it reduces costs. I want to talk about it kind of, you inspired me with something when you mentioned we've talked about product teams. There's this other team of, service teams, right? We've talked about if somebody creates a great product, and then somebody has to deal with the customers that are interacting with that product, either a problem or a question or a educational aspect of it. In a large company, those teams, I've seen it get out of sync very quickly. Product team does something, service team has no idea. Well, the customer doesn't care. They just see brand. They just want the brand, the company to give them the experience they want. How have you and the work that you've done bring those teams together, product and service?
yeah, that's a great question. I think, I'm fortunate enough to have kind of a varied experience. I've worked in a contact center, I've worked in BI and reporting, and I've worked very closely with product operations teams, like all along the way of kind of being in CX roles as well. And so I think like the biggest thing really is your network. And when I changed jobs, actually leaving the cable company that I used to work for and coming to LinkedIn, that was one of the most shocking things, was just kind of like realizing to myself, like you need to rebuild your entire Rolodex. Like this is a completely, new company, and you work remotely. And so how are you going to like establish relationships with all of these teams? I've always kind of seen myself as a bridge. Like in a lot of the roles I've held, I've been kind of the connector or the conduit between highly technical teams and less technical teams. So like explaining to the business what's possible based on engineering's constraints, and vice versa, like decoding business needs to the eng teams to understand what our senior leaders need. And so I think those skills and kind of translation, and building connections will serve you well if this is something that you need to do. So how I've done that, or how I've approached that well, I think with product and service, telling like real customer stories to a non-customer facing team, because I think it's so easy to get lost in your spreadsheets and dashboards.
Sure.
And when you're looking at like product usage trends, or product feature ramps, or things that are all like extraordinarily important. But when you're going through these line items and you're, as a product manager, maybe you're trying to get engineering to commit to something. But on a lot of those, pieces of slideware reports, the product ramp you're talking about, it might have a line item and say, this affects 10,500 customers, per week. And I think when you're looking at it at that macro level, you forget what the experience of just one of those customers can feel like. And so like we have some programs at my current company where we basically go into a specific customer journey, and we'll maybe summarize their experience with service, and share if they did complete a post-service survey. We'll kind of summarize that and walk the relevant product teams through it. In some cases, I think it actually goes up to some of our executive team members as well. And the goal is to basically be this empathy building session. and I think remind people of like, hey, look how much friction these types of mishaps can have for someone using our products or services. Take that experience back to your product meeting and extrapolate it or multiply it by how many people have that same experience or friction point. And I think that kind of like lights a little bit of a fire under you. And so I think conveying these stories back to the product org is the way for them to sort of get energized around like what they can do to help the end customer.
Sean, you've talked a lot about relationships, and I hear that woven throughout that, right? Even there, as you're talking about with the product and service, starting with relationships and then getting that connectivity back there, it can be challenging to build those relationships. It can be exhausting to build those relationships. And sometimes you just want to stop down and take a little break. And so I'm going to do that with you today. We're going to take a little break here as we enter the first class lounge. We'll move quickly here and have a little bit of fun. What is a dream travel location from your past?
Dream travel location from my past. Ooh. I would love to return to Montreal, Quebec. Big hockey fan, love the winter time. Lots of cool stuff to see, and it's a beautiful town. The last time I went, I got to see my Philadelphia Flyers play the Montreal Canadiens.
Nice.
A lot of fun. Yeah, it's just it's a great city with a lot of fun stuff to do and to see, and the food is fantastic too. So
yeah,
I'd love to get back.
I've definitely heard that. I didn't spend much time in Montreal. This is a long time ago when I was in Canada, maybe early aughts, late 90s, even like that kind of. But we went to Quebec City, and of course, you go to the old town Quebec City. It's the old kind of European style. But that part of Canada is it truly is. It's a taste of Europe in your Western Hemisphere, and it's a lot of fun. I can see why you'd want to go back there. What about going forward? What is a dream travel location you've not been to yet?
Yeah, so dream location that I've not been to yet, I think I would lean. This is tough, but I think I'm leaning towards Spain.
Yeah.
Similar reasons. Love, well, not the hockey and winter.
Not a lot of hockey there, but
as far as the food scene, the culture, I've heard fantastic things. I've also heard the beaches are great, and my wife and I are, we love a good glass of wine. So there's a lot of reasons, and we're foodies. A lot of good reasons to pull us out there.
Love it. Well, let's stay in that food space. What is a favorite thing of yours to eat?
Wow, it'd probably be easier to list things that are not, but
we'll get there.
Yeah, I think lately, we went to a French restaurant like a week ago, and I've been thinking about it ever since. So that probably wouldn't have always been my answer, but right now I'm on a little bit of a kick.
I like that.
It's fantastic.
Well, you got the French influence in Montreal and beyond. You went to that restaurant, so that makes sense. Okay,
that's right.
You said this would be easier. Let's see. What is something growing up you were forced to eat but you hated as a kid?
Hated as a kid, vegetables, and now I can't get enough.
There you go.
Yeah, I mean, anything green as a child, and as a new dad, I'm kind of going through it now. I thought my kid was, I thought he was a really good eater, and turns out he just kind of didn't have any preferences yet. And now that he's like had melted cheese and like a cookie and stuff, like good luck trying to get him to eat broccoli. Like, it's kind of
but pour that melted cheese all over that broccoli, and somehow you can get that snuck in. Yes,
yeah,
I love it. Oh, that's so funny.
He's learning his preferences, and it's making things a lot more challenging. So we
could do a whole episode not related to CX about how as kids discover their preferences, it makes life a lot more challenging. But we're not going to go there because that would totally derail the episode. We're going to have to leave the lounge. What is one travel item, not including your phone, not including your passport, that you will not leave home without?
Not leave without my phone or my passport. Wow. Probably my AirPods. Love to listen to music. I know there's this trend going on social media where folks try to do their flights with no phone, no music, no book, no nothing.
What?
Yes, look it up. It's like a point of pride if you can just sit through a flight and do nothing but stare at the back of the seat in front of you. Hey, more power to them. That sounds like some really cool mindfulness or presence or whatever you want to, self-discipline, whatever you want to call it. But it's not for me. I need I need my earbuds, and I need my music to relax and get through the travel.
Sean, I'm very disturbed by this trend, and this is a dated reference. It'll show my age. But for those that are Seinfeld fans, they will recall that there was a flight that Elaine and Putty took back from Europe to the US, and they got into another one of their fights because he was doing exactly that. Just staring at the back of the seat without a book, without headphones, without anything, and it drove her mad. And so I'm very disturbed by this next social media challenge. And so all I'd ask is, if I'm sitting next to someone like that on the plane, that don't you dare break that challenge by talking to me. Because when I'm on the plane, your lack of preparation is not a reason to bug my sanctity, my solitude. That's the word I was looking for. Oh man, I'm glad you told me that, so I can watch out for that. I do feel like there's a topic that the Podcasters Union would, well, actually, maybe I can get a SAG card out of this sometime. Anybody out there that knows, can podcaster get a SAG card? But the Podcasters Union would still get on to me if I didn't bring up AI. Now, all joking aside, right, we're past that initial hype. A lot of companies are now feeling like that AI actually has come up pretty short as a solution for them. Why is that? How can companies actually do better with AI now that the hype is over?
Yeah, great question. So, I mean, I actually, right before I spoke with you today, I saw an ad, a YouTube ad, and I don't even know the gentleman's name that was in it, but he said something about, kind of not expecting AI to be this kind of like grandiose like one-stop solution for all the world's problems, but instead to kind of think of it as a useful or helpful coworker that kind of rides along with you. And more I'm in that camp of like, I'll come right out and say, I think AI and the technology is incredible. I think there's a lot of great applications for it. It's super impressive, but it's come up short for me a number of times where, I've been trying to do something, or I just kind of, I like it for the more basic things. Like if I need like a template to start a document, so I'm not starting from zero, and it saves me a lot of time with kind of these simple tasks. I think the number one piece of advice that I would use with to, if a company came to me and as a consultant and asked like, how can we get the most out of AI? I think I would first just say, kind of like, temper your expectations with realism. Understand that like it's garbage in and garbage out. So since we're talking about service teams and customer experience, like the number one application that I see or hear about all the time is chatbots. And I would say, which again is obvious, right? Because if everyone is kind of in this mode of cost cutting, what better way to do it than to take all of your highly repeatable or high volume service interactions and find a way to reduce that volume or shift that volume to a bot for lower cost. Like it's a no brainer. But that AI bot's only going to be as good as like the knowledge center articles that you feed it, or like the large language models that you train it on. And I think the number one issue that I'm seeing is that the fundamentals just like aren't there. So like, what are your data foundations? I'll give you an example. Like I've worked with a quality team that reviews service cases, and they break down, and they don't get through all of them, but they do a sampling so that, one, they can use it for evaluating the representative's performance, but also so that as insights leaders, we can try and understand like what's working well and what's not working well in the service experience. And I was reading through these, and I was like thinking to myself, is there an AI application here where I could save some of these QA folks a little bit of time, and we could review a larger sample size? The problem is some of these things are behavioral, or like if the reps are not using the right tools, for example, and if your systems internally don't talk to each other in the right way, there's no way that AI could ever know that was the problem. And so now we're opening ourselves up to a possibility where there's like AI hallucination, or it's inventing a problem that maybe wasn't really there. So then now you have the challenging choice to make of either not use AI at all or grant it way too much trust, and now it's feeding you, unintelligible or unintelligent advice about the situation. So
Yeah.
I think my advice would basically be just to get your foundations in order and not be so over eager to slap AI on top of something, because in a situation like that, what you're doing, I think, is just getting your hopes up or setting your expectations too high. And also simultaneously increasing your tech debt by, now you have this even more complicated system where, you've integrated tools that aren't really going to work that well for you, maybe.
I think, and as you're saying that, and I think we're going to close the episode on this because I think what you said is such a sort of salient theme. And it was when you talk about tech debt and you talk about the integration of the systems. I think a lot of us, when we first started hearing AI, first of all, AI has been around for decades, right? It's just because of when ChatGPT came into our collective consciousnesses, then it really sort of took on a new life of its own. Almost there's nothing new under the sun sort of feel here, right? Yes, it is an accelerant of a tool. It is a companion, like you said, a colleague, a coworker. And it has all of the same challenges that implementing SAP did a decade ago or 2 decades ago or whatever that looked like when we were in that world of it doesn't just plop in and automatically solve your problems. There's the thoughtfulness of how it's going to be used, how you're going to feed it with information, how it's going to integrate into your actual business processes. All of that is what I heard you say there. And that makes a lot of sense to me, how we're now, okay, the hype's over. Oh yeah, this didn't quite work like we thought. And yet there's still a ton of value to extract from this. Sean, this is, I like how we were slightly all over the map, which is how I like my journeys to go, actually, right? The unexpected path is actually kind of delightful. If folks wanted to get to know a little bit more about you, your approach to customer experience, your thoughts in that space, hey, making sure that product and service teams stay aligned, or your views towards relationships inside a business, what's the best way for them to get to connect with you and know you better?
Yeah, I would say, well, shameless plug, right? But
I was going to say, I bet your answer is
I work for LinkedIn, so no bias intended. But yeah, obviously, you can always find me on LinkedIn, and feel free to drop me a line there, or I'm happy to respond to any messages, or if anyone has any questions or business problems that they'd like to maybe unpack or discuss. I'm an open book, and
nice.
Always happy to chat and meet new folks.
I'll definitely get that down there in the show notes. And yeah, as I was asking the question, I'm like, well, I bet you I know his answer. It probably is one of those, it better be that answer, right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
So, but of course, that's one of the best places to connect. That's how we came to know each other, is exactly through a mutual connection there on LinkedIn. And then we have developed our relationship here. Sean, it was a delightful conversation. We went the full episode without having any discussion around football, which is fantastic. Not because I dislike it, but because we're going to avoid that conflict. So, Sean, I do appreciate having you on the show today. Thank you for being on CX Passport.
Hey, thank you, Rick. Thanks so much for having me. It was a great time, and we'll chat soon, hopefully.
Thanks for joining us this week on CX Passport. If you like today's episode, I have 3 quick next steps for you. Click subscribe on the CX Passport YouTube channel or your favorite podcast app. Next, leave a comment below the video or a review in your favorite podcast app so others can find and enjoy CX Passport too. Then head over to cxpassport.com for show notes and resources that can help you create tangible business results by delivering great customer experience. Until next time, I'm Rick Denton, and I believe the best meals are served outside and require a passport.